Okay, so in the last video, Sal and I spent some time talking about his reactions to this resignation letter from Gerald Conte. Appeared on the internet the other week. What I want to do in this conversation is go from there to the first step in the writing process where you actually write something down that you're going to probably keep going forward. And that is something that writing teachers call the thesis sentence. And it's really just the main point. If you were to write an essay about this resignation letter, if Sal were to write an essay about it, what at the end of the day would be the one sentence that would capture his main point? What we're going to do just in the next few minutes is talk about how you would go after that. So first of all, before we do anything formal, Sal, as you're looking at this, what are some of the points you'd want to make sure you would make somewhere in that essay, even if it's not your main point? You just want to make sure you made some points. What are some of the ones that come to mind?
One is what we touched on in the last video, which is this idea that that this is kind of painting a pretty broad a broad brush of what STEM is, or and kind of I would say to some degree belittles it. It's kind of a seeks data-driven education, seeks only conformity. Once again, I understand where he's coming from, and I think I understand, and I agree with some of his emotions of what he's reacting against. But I think this was maybe a little bit unfairly kind of picking on STEM as maybe the reason for a lot of his
Got it.
angst.
Okay, so that's going to probably lead to a thesis sentence that's going to have two parts. One is going to have a word like although beginning, which is going to acknowledge that Gerald has a point. So although blah or something on the one hand or blah, blah, blah. But then you're going to introduce your point somewhere along the line which says but or whatever. So we'll keep that in mind.
And I'll throw out another one.
Okay.
We didn't get to it in the last video, but I doubly underlined this, particularly not at our school. And I think this is, something that you see a lot of. My sense is that he probably was a very good teacher at a very good school, where when you do try to overlay more rigidity on that, you are hampering his ability to be a great teacher and being that. But it's not, and I'm not, I'm not an expert here, but it's speaking to only one type of circumstance. There might be environments where a lot of the motivations for the micromanaging or the conformity or the standardization is actually coming from to kind of de-risk environments that are not as good as the environment that Gerald Conte is working at. So it's kind of this, there isn't one classroom environment, there isn't one class of teachers. And one of my big beliefs is that there's not like a solution that can be applied wholesale to all classrooms or all contexts.
Well, the irony is he actually was pushing back against a one-size-fits-all mentality, but you could argue from at least one perspective that he's actually imposing a one-size-fits-all from an elite education point of view, generalizing out. Again, I went to very elite educational schools. I totally empathize with what he's doing, but I don't think it generalizes, and I think the real struggles and the reason we have all these challenges in society is because it doesn't generalize. And then, so what might? And by the way, I think the Khan Academy may be part of something that might. So I think it's pretty exciting. Well, let's say. So I heard two ideas. I heard something about the idea that you're casting STEM in the wrong light. And then I heard.
I just get always defensive on that.
Good.
STEM isn't just about.
Well, and by the way, as a humanities guy, we tend to get defensive the other way, which is it's STEM, and it's like, God damn, there's something besides STEM, and you acknowledge that a lot. So, but I think that's great, which is getting the perspective on STEM. Do you think your main point in this essay would be that, or do you think you'd step back and try to also include this idea about the more I'll say elite education I don't want to in any way imply that that's a negative. I actually think elite education is a good thing, but that notion that it's more of a restricted environment.
Yeah, I think this would. I wouldn't talk so much about the STEM. I definitely reacted to it a little bit, but I don't think that's even the main point of his letter here.
Yep.
The main point of his letter is kind of what the micromanaging and the governance and strangling his creativity or the creativity of a great teacher. And so I think what I would write about is which is something I speak a lot about, is whenever the system, whether it's a governor or a politician or superintendent gets worried about the education system, their reaction is to place more constraints on it, make it more rigid, and it might de-risk some of the worst classrooms, some of the ones that are really failing, and where students aren't even getting to kind of a minimal level. But it has the horrible consequences of what Gerald Conti is writing about, where it's also suppressing the very best teachers, and it's kind of a march to mediocrity.
Okay, let's say I think that's a terrific main point. So let's try to build a thesis sentence around that last idea. So a thesis sentence consists really of two parts: a subject and a predicate, or a topic and a claim that you're going to make about that topic. So, what is the topic of that you just were speaking to a minute ago?
That I can understand the motivation of officials to try to de-risk the worst performing classrooms or schools, but the only way they know how to do that is by placing more rigidity and more standardization across classrooms and more testing, and often superficial testing. But that has a horrible effect on the system as a whole, because it also holds back the best teachers.
Okay, so the claim, although we haven't gotten crisp yet about the topic, we've gotten very crisp about the claim. The claim has a horrible effect on the educational system as a whole, because it places constraints on the best teachers. So
Right.
So if the claim has a horrible effect on the educational system, what is the subject of that sentence? What has a horrible effect on it?
So, and let me know if I'm going in the wrong direction here. But so I guess where I'm narrowing in on is, I understand the desire for people to standardize and put and test. I understand where that motivation comes from. But the solution that they're placing on teachers like Gerald Conti, in my mind, is not the correct one. That there are solutions that can hopefully help you bring up the standard of the worst performing schools without necessarily holding back the Gerald Contis of the world.
Okay, all right. So what I'm trying to get to, I'm actually getting something more micro than macro. So, and we're circling in on it. So, the thing that you have empathy for, but that in its current form is being destructive, we need to name it.
Yeah.
So, and we need to give it like a noun phrase. So is it standardized testing? Is it governmental regulation? What is it what's the main
That I have empathy for?
Well, that's having a horrible effect on education. You're having empathy for why people are doing it. But at the end of the day,
I think the thing that's having the bad effect is the rigidity and micromanaging, or the standardization. Let's call it micromanaging and rigidity.
Okay, micromanaging and rigidity. But it's got to be some form of governance, right? I mean, in other words, because. Well, I guess you could say micromanaging and rigidity are having a horrible effect on.
Well, it's this kind of notion of a top-down, state-mandated
So
curriculum that has to be followed.
I think
that to the T.
Okay, I think that's top-down, state-mandated curricula that need to be followed to the T is the topic. Now, it's actually it turns out that what we're really saying is state-mandated curricula, and then we've added top-down and we've added that need to be followed to the T. Those are modifiers, but basically what we're talking about is state-mandated curricula, and we're saying we have a side idea, which is, while it could help de-risk certain classrooms in certain situations, so you it's not a completely one-sided argument. Our main claim is, what is our main claim about these curricula? What's the most important thing to know about them?
That they are holding back. They are suppressing the Gerald Contis of the world.
Okay. They do hold education back by suppressing the Gerald Contis of the world. So we might have a thesis sentence which says, top-down state-mandated curriculum, that need to be followed to the T. We might put in a comma for a sort of a qualifying clause, while helping whatever your point was.
While motivated to which might help de-risk some of the worst performing classrooms.
Okay, cool. Which might help de-risk some of the worst performing classrooms. Yeah, there you go.
Let me scroll down a little bit.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of Ozymandias down here, which might help de-risk. I don't know how to spell half of these words.
That's
that
perfect.
I say
That's
all the
perfect.
time.
We're not worried about. We're not at the spelling part of this writing. We're at the
You have a
beginning.
little hyphen there.
That's fine.
Help de-risk the worst performing classrooms.
Yep.
Performing classrooms.
Yep.
Also has the impact of holding back the very best.
Yeah, I wouldn't say also. I just say
Has the.
Yeah, it has the impact. The negative impact, or
The
yeah,
negative
whatever.
impact.
I'm writing for you.
Of holding. That's a good way to write. Just get a famous author right next to you. Just get them to do your work. Impact of holding holding back the very best.
Okay. Now we're still very early in the writing process. So this is not the actual sentence probably that will end up in the last essay. But what this is, we call this a thesis sentence because as we go forward in the writing process, we're going to try to organize all the subsequent work we do to be in service to some part of this sentence. And so as we build paragraphs, we'll build paragraphs around curricula. We might build a paragraph around managing to the T. We certainly would build one around de-risking worst performing schools, and then we'd probably build the bulk of our argument around holding back the very best.
Right. So, I mean, if I were to write this out as, I mean, I'm thinking about this, how with this as my thesis sentence, I would write a little bit about the motivations of administrators and officials, why they're even thinking along these lines, and that's all about the test scores and the number of kids who have to take remedial math, the number of et cetera, all of the things you read in the newspaper. But then I would really focus in on that might help a classroom that's like this or that's really broken, but it's going to definitely hold back that. And then I would try to write about kind of alternate solutions that might be able to address the broken classrooms without breaking the not broken classrooms.
So there's actually another part of this. This could be a second thesis. We should close now, but there's going to be a second part of this, which is, but there is a way forward, which is more creative and constructive.
Right.
Cool.